the topic of AB 392, so I want to give him the floor.
Yeah, and I'll use this occasion to maybe expand it. It's just not 392, but I'm hoping that Acting Assistant Sheriff Gross will take back to the sheriff and all the executives that I think the department misses a real opportunity when they don't involve the Oversight Commission in the public prior to crafting policy. We recognize it is the sheriff's prerogative to write policy for the department, but we saw this in the previous sheriff, and we're hoping maybe we can avoid that same mistake here. That I think some real value can be had by, before you decide to put policy out, give the commission a chance and the public to weigh in on issues, because they have particularly the public has obviously they're a major stakeholder in this whole operation, and they need to be heard. And that's not to say that the policy won't still be the property of the Sheriff's Department once it is in fact adopted. But I would hope that you would take back to the sheriff that we really would like to see more interaction between the commission and the public prior to policy coming out. So I think it ends up providing everyone with much better policy that is more easily followed.
So thank you, Mr. Harris. I appreciate your comments. One thing I didn't mention is we do vet our policy through County Council. As far as the commission, we obviously want to work with the commission, and we want to make sure that you see our policies. I'm not prepared at this time to say that we can do that, but I would say that we'll have to look at that and look at the logistics of that, because a lot of times when we're making our policies, it's quite a long period to get them through all the different levels of review, and so we want policies to come out and be relevant and time sensitive. So, but I do appreciate your comments, and I'll bring that back to the sheriff.
Thank you, Chief. I did want to mention that the sheriff himself, when he appeared at one of our meetings previously, told the commission that all the policies prior to being enacted would be reviewed by the COC. So we might want to remind him of the same.
Yes, sir, I'll do that. Again, I didn't hear that comment, so I'll remind him of it, and then we'll come back to you with that.
Thank you.
I'm not saying it didn't occur. I'm just saying I wasn't there. Thank you.
And I'd just like to add that some of the best work, I think, that this commission has done directly with the Sheriff's Department, with input from the community, is when we have sat down and looked at the PREA regulations and how can that come to life on the ground, these federal regulations that are so complex. We were able to give some input on that. We worked collaboratively on MET, the mental evaluation teams, the shifting and the expansion. We were able to be an asset with that. So, we want to oversight because we have that responsibility. But we also are open to collaborating and have always been open to collaborating. So if you could bring that message back too.
Yes, ma'am. Collaboration will be good for us as well. And again, you are having input because everything you're saying here goes back with me. And so I'm one of the people that signs off on the policy. So I'm taking everything into account that you're saying right now.
Good. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to move to agenda item 2C, a presentation by the Office of Inspector General regarding the Inmate Welfare Fund. And we have Monitor Ms. Noemi Zamacona, who's conducted research, has prepared a presentation for us regarding the Inmate Welfare Fund and other inmate-related expenses. So welcome, Ms. Zamacona.
Thank you. Good morning, Commissioners, Madam Chair. My name is Noemi Zamacona, and I'm a monitor with the Office of Inspector General. I'm here to provide you with a brief overview of the Inmate Welfare Fund. I will be providing some examples of how these funds are generated, how they are distributed, and how they are spent. California Penal Code Section 4025 allows the county sheriffs to operate commissaries, canteens. It also allows the sheriff to fix sale prices on those items. And all profits will be then placed into the inmate welfare fund and shall be used primarily for the benefit, education, and welfare of inmates. The sheriff may use any of the funds that are not needed for the welfare of the inmates for maintenance of the jail. The funds shall not be used for things such as meals, clothing, housing, medical services, or other expenses of confining inmates, except that the sheriff may use that money to fund and augment required county expenses. So the Inmate Welfare Fund, so this is a slide, I don't know if, can you see the text on the bottom back there? I can read it. This is for the fiscal year 2018-19. The total Inmate Welfare Fund revenue was about $35 million. And the revenues consisted of commissary commission, which includes vending, telephone contracts, and other sources, which can include the visitor lockers, jail enterprise, and interest. The LESD, like most jurisdictions, have interpreted the language primarily to mean exactly 51% of the program, 51 to go to programming and 49 to go to jail maintenance. Next, we're going to be talking about how determinations and allocations are made for these funds for both programming and jail maintenance. For the programming, there's an Inmate Welfare Commission that consists currently of 7 members that are appointed by the sheriff. They meet once a month and are dark in the months of July and August. I'll include a couple of items that are funded through the Inmate Welfare Fund here. Again, these are just a couple of examples for programming. So the tattoo removal program. According to the department, it has provided over 6,700 treatments since 2014. The Inmate Welfare funds 4 of the tattoo removal machines, a custody assistant that provides security, and the nurse's salary. Inmate Welfare funds therapy, the 5 key school and programs, which has a number of different classes such as life skills, parenting, computer technology. Just to give you a sense of how many participants are in those classes, there's a snapshot of, for the month of March of 2018, approximately 1,200 incarcerated people participated in multiple educational programs. They also have a birth certificate program, and according to the department, they've helped incarcerated people obtain 3,800 copies of birth certificates. Their DMV program, and these are all in 2018, these numbers. They provided approximately 1,700 IDs. The Inmate Welfare Fund also funds all of the program supplies, so that could be anything from a photocopier to televisions. For the jail maintenance portion of the Inmate Welfare Fund, that is determined by the sheriff. So these are not reviewed by the commission. And some of the items that are funded by the sheriff are, for example, air conditioner repairs, security cameras, toilet replacements, lighting, classrooms, door lock replacements, ADA physical plant modifications, as well as salaries. There are 87 funded salaries that support all of the programs, including Inmate Services Bureau, Population Management. So how is this Inmate Welfare Fund generated? You should know that the commission that the department is able to make off of commissary is 53% of all of the commissary items. So for example, if you go into custody and you are given a basic hygiene kit, anything additional other than that kit needs to be purchased from about 100 different items from the commissary. An example of those items could be Irish spring soap, roll-on deodorant, fresh mint toothpaste, cocoa butter, and tampons. This column shows the LA cost, or technically would be the vendor revenue. And this column here shows the prices that incarcerated people pay for those items. And some of the markups are as much as 100%. So this, for the total fiscal year of 2018-19, this column shows the total number of quantity of those items that were ordered. And just to give you some context, there are about 17,000 incarcerated people in custody. And this column here will show you the total amount of money spent by incarcerated people and their families to purchase these items. So when this money, then 47% of that will go to the vendor, and 53% would be what's kept for commission for the inmate welfare fund. So we can use an example of how this commissary item. So this bag of hot Cheetos at Walmart in the free world cost $2.32. The sale price for an incarcerated person to purchase this item is $5.33. $2.51 is the revenue that will go back to the distributor, which is the cost that they receive the item for, and the 53%, which is the $2.82, is what makes it into the inmate welfare fund. So the sale price, and then out of the sale price, $2.82 makes it into the inmate welfare fund. As I explained earlier, 51% of the entire inmate welfare fund goes to programming. 49% of that percent goes to facilities. So you'll distribute that into, so it'll be $1.41 to programs and then $1.38 to facilities. Telephone, the telephone contract is another source of revenue for the department. The department receives a minimum annual guarantee payment of $15 million for each year of the contract. Here you can see the rates that incarcerated people will pay if they make a call. So in-state calls are 25 cents per minute, and interstate calls, long distance calls, other states, are 21 cents per minute. And the reason for that price difference is that in 2016, the FCC set an interim rate cap that applies to interstate long distance calls. And then right below it, you'll see the service charges. And all of the service charges and the fees go directly to the service provider. They don't make it into the inmate welfare fund. That goes straight to the service provider. The Inmate Welfare Fund has long been criticized as unduly burdensome to incarcerated people and their families, and is being more of a mechanism for generating profit than for increased program and rehabilitation. In February of this year, Senator Holly Mitchell of District 30 introduced Senate Bill 555. And here are a few things that SB 555 proposes. And that's, I think, really small for people, so maybe you should read it. It would rename the Inmate Welfare Fund to the Incarcerated People's Fund. It would prohibit profits from canteen. It would require funds to be spent solely rather than primarily for the benefit of education and welfare of incarcerated people. It would require counties to award contracts to those that offer the lowest cost to incarcerated people. It would require counties to negotiate for low rates and refuse unnecessary extra fees. And would it prohibit companies from charging new fees to offset any lost revenue. And currently, the bill was placed in the suspense file by the Assembly Committee of Appropriations, where it will continue on to the second year of the 2-year legislative cycle. Irrespective of the changes in the current inmate welfare legislation, the LESD should identify ways to significantly reduce commissary and telephone costs for incarcerated people, increase the 51% currently allotted solely to programming. For example, the department should reconsider spending the inmate welfare funds to maintain habitable temperatures in the jail and instead use the sheriff's budget to absorb the cost of the air conditioning repairs. It should increase the internal oversight of all inmate welfare allocations. Funding determinations procedure is inconsistent between the programming and the jail maintenance. Currently, County Council only approves programming funding allocations for the 51%, so for programming. For program funding requests, they must be signed off by facility leadership before it's reviewed by County Council to ensure that the request is compliant with the penal code. Jail maintenance funds requests, on the other hand, are reviewed by County Council and are not voted on by the Commission. Every request is ultimately reviewed by either the Director of Facility Services Bureau or the Assistant Director. Facility Services provides the Commission with periodic updates. The LESD should begin to include County Council in the funding approval process of jail maintenance requests. It should provide more detailed information to the Commission about the budgeted positions and all funded programs so that the Commission can make the most informed decisions. And any future contracts introducing technology and technology media should ensure the lowest possible cost to incarcerated people. That went really fast. There you go. Most recently, Commander Morjan announced that women at CRDF will now be receiving unrestricted access and free access to tampons. So this is some progress updates. It's begun to conduct a cost-benefit analysis of the inmate welfare programs, and the LESD is beginning the outreach to other jurisdictions that offer low cost or free telephone calls for incarcerated people. And that concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
This is illuminating. So my question is, and then I'll open it up to the commissioners. When you were doing this monitoring and research, were you able to get fairly easy to get this information, the financial aspects, where the money's coming from, where the money's going? Is it fairly transparent, or what was your experience?
In terms of receiving the documentation, there wasn't any delay and received all of the documents that were requested. There was a little bit of, there's some portions of it that need a little more detail in terms of what you have a planned budget for a fiscal year, and then you have the financials that state, for example, $9 million education. So itemized expenditure financial documentation, and we're working with the department to obtain that.
Okay, so in terms of the salaries,
yes.
For example, if there's was $9 million for educational projects or opportunities, does that include the salaries of either the deputies or outside entities who would come in and do those educational things? Is that where one place salaries would show up?
I don't know necessarily if in that financial statement that I reviewed, that's if salaries were included there, because it wasn't detailed. but the way that the inmate welfare fund is structured, salaries can be items that are funded. So it would include either security to support these programs, or it would actually provide for the salaries for the people administrating the programs.
Okay, all right. Commissioner Talentino.
What is the composition of the Inmate Welfare Commission? Who's on it?
In terms of the career backgrounds, or what do you mean specifically, the composition?
They're appointed by the sheriff, so who does he appoint?
Whoever the sheriff decides to appoint, he appoints. I know that.
Who's there now?
Their names, or do you mean like their backgrounds? I can tell you that the people who are sitting on the commission, I was able to speak to some of them, and their backgrounds range from workforce development to immigration rights, and even an administrator of vocational services.
Are they from the sheriff's department, or are they from the community? From the community. All of them?
There's no active employees of the sheriff's department. There is a retired sheriff's personnel.
And then the jail maintenance is completely under the jurisdiction of the sheriff?
Yes, so the sheriff determines and has discretion of how those funds are spent.
How do they interact, the commission and the sheriff?
The
commission says, I need air conditioning repairs. Does he have to have the approval of the commission, or does he have to ask for a recommendation from the commission?
The commission's allowed to vote. So for example, let's say they don't actually vote on jail maintenance though. So they would vote on a program, but the commission doesn't vote for funding requests for jail maintenance. So anything jail maintenance related, toilets, locks, light bulbs, anything like that just goes through the sheriff's department. It doesn't get voted on by the commission, and it's not reviewed by county council.
So who made the determination what the inmate commission does and what does the jail maintenance does? Because it seems to me that some of the jail maintenance is really what the county ought to be providing: repairing the air conditioning, repairing security cameras, toilet replacements, lighting. And then it just seems like the commission has said, here's what you have to do: dog therapy, tattoo removal, those kinds of programs. So who makes the determination who does what?
Are you talking about, like I said, the jail maintenance is determined by the sheriff's department. The commission votes only on program related items. So
okay, how does the commission determine what's program related?
So
let me address this. Okay. Long ago, a legal decision was made that the word primarily means 51%. And as she said, that's common in other jurisdictions. I think it's outrageous, but it is common. And so based on that, it has always been the practice that they take 51% of the funds and they send that to that commission, and they decide about dog therapy or other programs. The other 49%, that commission never hears about, sees, or does anything about. Bureaucrats take it and they spend it on whatever the heck they want, which is jail maintenance. And as you say, it's stuff we, the county, ought to be paying. That's probably why this has become a 2-year bill, this SB 5555, because it's a huge amount of money that the county has put into its budget on the backs of people making phone calls and buying tampons. Now, nobody thinks that's conscionable, but everybody is hesitating to stop it because it's a big pile of money they would have to replace. We had this conversation I forget how long ago, 2-3 years back, in which everybody in the county said, oh yeah, that's outrageous, we should change that. And oh yeah, we should just fund, if we want to maintain our jail, we should fund it, and then we should do that, and we should charge people reasonable rates to make a phone call, and tampons, maybe we should give them to them, which apparently now we're about to actually do. So everybody's known this problem for a while, but the reason it's stalling is because there's so much money on the table. But to answer your direct question, that 51% goes through them and they decide, but the 49% they never see, and that was all decided as a legal matter.
And just to clarify, the jail maintenance provides updates to the commission, but they don't vote on whether or not those projects are funded.
So what is the composition of the inmate commission now? It just seems to me that it's public knowledge as to what their names or what they do. I mean, I'd just like to know who's on it.
I don't have their names with me currently, but I can give those to you. I know a couple of them, the folks that I did speak with.
And they're, well...
Would they be on the website,
No,
the sheriff's website?
I appreciate Max's explanation, and that gives me a lot of information. But it seems to me we need to know the composition. We need to know what their, at least I do, the composition, what their actual responsibilities are, and how they're chosen by the sheriff, I suppose.
Okay. In your monitoring, are you able to look at the budgets? Like this 35 million, is that what needs to be there all the time? Is it an aggregate? I mean, how much is added every year? How does the budgeting function?
So with the financial statements that I was provided prior to this, there are a couple of binders worth of them. You can extract that information, so there might be maybe an audit to see whether or not what's listed there was actually spent, to determine whether or not that's how the money was actually allocated for.
But it's not a budget, like an annual budget that you have to spend it down in a specified amount of time and fill it up in a specified amount of time. Do you have any information about that?
I don't.
Okay, well, I think one of the things we're talking about money here, and we're talking about more than how much it costs for toothpaste. We're talking about $35 million, where it comes, how it's spent, et cetera. So that's a pretty good deep dive to have. But you go, and then you'll go. No, go ahead.
Well, Commissioner Rubin has been...
Oh, no, that's okay. More than just a couple of years, as the Inspector General knows, these issues have been raised and talked about throughout the criminal justice system for years. Inmates and their families have complained about the outrageous costs of phone calls, items, to purchase, and the idea that, we're now still talking about the fact that this hasn't been rectified is really pretty outrageous. With that said, you have a number of 35 million for the fiscal year 2018-2019. How does that number compare with previous years? Up, down?
I actually don't have that information.
Okay.
We can certainly obtain it.
And is there also the people on the Welfare Commission side, are they appointed for specific terms, if you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, no.
Okay, that is all information I think would be helpful, and perhaps we could have that in the future. But it is, understanding what the Inspector General said about the amount of money the county may lose, the fact that this is paid for on the backs of inmates and their families is simply unconscionable.
I've just emailed to your executive director. He can forward to you something you can get online easy enough, a grand jury report about this issue that breaks down a little bit about what the money was then. That grand jury, the recommendations as I read them now are almost identical to ours, and it was from 1998.
And I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I seem to remember that there was a grand jury investigation from 20 years ago.
So, thank you for your report, first of all. Looking at the last slide, you say that the LASD is beginning to do outreach for low cost or free service providers for phone calls. Does that mean that the Sheriff's Department has already made the policy decision to switch to a free or low cost carrier?
I would think that's a better suited question for the department.
I agree. Is that something that's been decided, sir?
Well, sir, we brought Assistant Sheriff Olmsted from custody. This is more of his area of expertise than mine, and so I would defer to have someone from that group come up and answer that.
Good. Here they come.
Good morning, Captain Kim Unland. I'm assigned to Inmate Services Bureau. I have my backup with me if I can't answer the question. But the item that you've asked about is what is the Sheriff's Department doing as far as future? Just so you know, it is our position that in the spirit of SB 55 and the concerns that the Commission has as well as the community has of these costs for inmates and their families for commissary and telephones, it is our position as we move forward to keep that in the forefront, that we're looking at that. We are in the process of a new contract for telephones, and we're looking at pricing, we're looking at enhanced communications for our inmates as well. That will give them the ability to do more education with possibly tablets. So we are being progressive in this area. It's the standard that is national. Advancing technologies and also looking at ways for no cost or low cost to the inmates. So that is the spirit of where we're going as a department.
Great. Can I ask as a follow-up how far along you are on, I assume it's putting out cost bids or doing some other type of vetting of different providers? Is that something that you're pretty far along on?
So right now we're in the process of getting an extension for our current telephone contract, and our commissary and vending contract will expire in May of 2020. So we're in the RFP process for that.
For the commissary or
and
for
vending.
Okay.
Commissary and vending.
And then for the calls, do you have a contract that extends for some period that you're bound to right
We're trying to get an extension for 2 years so we can move forward with the RFP process to look for a vendor that can provide the telephone service that we need as well as the enhanced communication systems.
And this was discussed at a equivalent of a CAR meeting. I go to meetings where justice deputies get together and talk about justice issues. This was for a budget one. And in that, I believe there was a representative of the department saying that they were trying to continue the current contract, which allows these very high rates before the new law came in and cut off this source of revenue. I don't disagree that this new perspective is one that is catching on in the department, but sitting there in the budget room, that's not what was being said. What was being said is we want to continue this so we can keep getting these outrageous fees because soon it's going to be illegal, and that we'll have those 2 years additional to make our change. I don't fault the department for this because the entire state is acting this way and every other jail acts this way. But it is time that we convert these expenditures to a budget item that the county pays directly. The use of the 51% is jail needs facilities work and needs all these repairs. It needs to be a budgeted item. So I don't question the desire to make this change. I think everybody on the ground involved in this thinks it's outrageous. But I tell you, it was chilling being in that budget meeting, hearing the people talk about making the numbers work. This is why budgets drive inhumane behavior. And so we, the county, and I'm not dropping this on the Sheriff's Department, we, the county, have to step up and change this and work with the Sheriff's Department to make these things, which are good expenditures, budget items. And then there should be $0 in the Inmate Welfare Fund.
Great. You know, I'm really glad you're here today. I'm glad we have this item agendized. And I think it's extremely important, and applauding the Sheriff's Department for moving in the right direction on this, and I think we can be helpful. So I suggest that we create an ad hoc committee, and I'd like to have Commissioner Tolentino chair that committee. And you can be a point person with folks, and I know you have to leave right now, so why don't you, I don't think we have to name anybody else, but you'll be on it? Okay, great, right, we have 2 people. Can we have an ad hoc of 2? Is that okay, just 2 people? Okay, let's go with the 2 of you for right now, because we've got a lot of other ad hocs. And then by maybe next meeting, you could, get a little organized about how you're going to approach this and let us know. But any other questions? Please, I know that the commissioner had to leave, so I wanted to let him know that he just got a new assignment. Any other Any other questions? I think this is fascinating. I am really like, where, $35 million, where does it come from? Where does it go? And I'm glad that you guys are on top of it too. So, great. Okay, public comment now.
Our first speaker, Regi Bunch, followed by Adriana Wong, followed by Nick S.
I'm starting to see all the fruit of the labor of organizing around making sure this Civilian Oversight Commission exists, right? $35 million. $35 million. How many kids could have went to college? How many of those inmates could have had a pathway into new jobs, into having college degrees? $35 million. It's like y'all said, it's unconscionable. And I appreciate you, Patti Giggans, for creating a ad hoc on this. I'm looking forward to seeing the recommendations. I know ad hoc committees are not public meetings, I believe. They are? They're not. And so if organizations or folks could give type of documentations, we'll send them to.
Yes, and also ad hoc committees do meet with community members, they meet with department members, so absolutely a lot of dialogue, a lot of research, conversations, absolutely.
And I'm also curious if the Alternatives to Incarceration Working Group would like to hear about this money and how this money can be funneled towards, mental health treatment and other type of things that the county is trying to do a huge paradigm shift on when it comes to incarceration. But this is, the sheriff's department, right? This is the arrogance that families have been dealing with for decades. And so I appreciate the work that's about to happen, and let's get this ball rolling. Ashe.
Adriana Wong, followed by Nick S.
Hi, Adriana Wong, ACLU of Southern California. I think the commissioner asked, where does this money come from? I think that's a really important question. Who's paying this money? And so I think it's important to note that it's primarily poor families and primarily Black families in Los Angeles County that are paying these telephone and commissary markups. Black Angelenos are 9% of the total population, but roughly 30% of people in jail. Roughly half of Black households are struggling to make ends meet. 80 to 90% of people in the criminal system are indigent, meaning they can't afford to pay for their own attorney. It's, like you said, unconscionable that we're expecting them to pay these amounts into the system. With respect to the 51%, we completely agree that should be a budget item. With respect to the 49%, what you're doing is you're using the poorest families in the county to obscure the actual cost of incarceration, right? So we are very supportive of the IG's recommendations and the ad hoc committee and of SB 555. I think a problem we see often is that there are progressive forces in the county and holistic forces in the county when it comes to decarceration. And helping people towards better outcomes, but one hand doesn't talk to the other, right? So at the same time that we're talking about this, maybe the county's lobbying against the bill in the Capitol. So I think it's important to talk about things like issuing resolutions in favor of bills that push economic justice for LA County. So I hope you think about those things as well. Thanks.
Nick S.
I'm glad I stuck around to hear this. Let me tell you about the inmate. When you're in incarceration, you get what's called a fish kit. Fish kit comes with like a small toothbrush, a little bit of toothpaste that probably brush your teeth 3 times. And the toothbrush that you use, when you use it, maybe the 4th time the bristles fall out. Maybe you could use some of that money on a better fish kit. Maybe helping some inmates that have problems, financial problems, like they need $300 to pay a fine to get their license back so they can go get a job. Because you're in jail for a reason. You know, sometimes people are there because of bad decisions, and sometimes they're there because they don't have money to pay fines. But $35 million, I mean, that's a lot of money. I wish I could use some of that to go to school, back to school. But anyway, I think, yeah, and the deodorant inside there, it's a little bag with deodorant. You gotta tear the little bag and throw it under your arm real fast, and it lasts about maybe 2 seconds. So some of that money, also on the phone, that's the biggest ripoff I've ever seen. I've actually witnessed inmates lose cases over that phone, because not only is you're asking for people to accept those phone calls that are super expensive, but that also might stop people from doing what's called getting a burnout phone. So what they'll do is somebody will steal somebody's information, they'll set up an account for a phone line, and then they'll have a bunch of people calling collect on it, and that'll stop that. You know, if you get reasonable, I'm not saying give a free phone call, but if you guys can really fix that one, that's one that actually hurt me a couple times in jail. And you know, you want to talk to your loved ones too. You know, so that's the biggest highway robbery I ever could think of in jail, is the collect call thing that they have going on. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is that it? Okay, let's move to agenda item 3, commission updates. We have our report from the executive director, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of quick items for the commission's benefit. Several weeks ago, we sent a letter to the sheriff asking him for some information concerning several shootings that had occurred, primarily the one involving Mr. Twyman. We asked for the names of the deputies, what their status was, as well as some additional information and videotapes. They did reply with that information, and we are appreciative of that, and we intend to push that information out to members of the commission. We specifically asked if we can push that information out to the families as well, and the sheriff replied, yes, we can, so we're going to pass that information on to them. And that was a request from the commission and from the families when they spoke at our meeting, at our last meeting that we had here. Secondly, we wanted to report that several of us will be attending the NACOL conference next week, myself and several members of the staff and several members of the commission. I'm pleased to inform you that we're going to be presenting on 3 different topics there next week. So we'll come back at our next meeting and give you an update on how that went. 2 last items. On October 19th, the COC will have a booth at the Taste of Soul, a big community event that happens on Crenshaw Boulevard. We'll have it staffed by members of our staff, but if members of the commission want to participate, please let us know. We'd love to have you out. It's a really nice event, really large event, great food, music, and people. And it's a chance for us to sort of get our message out there. And finally, on November 16th, 2019, we will hold our 2nd annual policing conference. This one will be held on a Saturday afternoon for most of the day at St. Anne's Conference Center here in the downtown area. As we get closer to the date, we'll push some additional information out to you. So that's about it. Thank you.
Okay. Now we'd like to hear from Mr. Huntsman, Inspector General.
It's been 3 months since I spoke to you, and so I have quite a lot to cover. It's going to be general, but more than I would otherwise be doing. I have some hard words, but I want to start with some softer words. I echo what Brian just said about being appreciative of that information regarding the shootings. Supreme Court ruled a long time ago that the names of officers involved in shootings had to be public, and the Sheriff Department has rarely complied with that ruling. They are allowed to withhold them when there is a specific credible threat against the officers, as is appropriate, but they very rarely put them out in a timely manner. So the fact that the COC had made that request and the Sheriff chose to honor it, 1, I think is excellent, and 2, the fact that he said, yeah, and yes, you can give that to the families as well. I applaud that. Our Sheriff has also put out video in a timely manner in some cases where it was very important, and that publicly transparent approach, I think, is critical, and I applaud it. I also want to applaud Chief Burson, who I think it was yesterday, allowed my staff to print out a list of open IA cases, which we had previously been denied, and that was, I think, an important step, so I appreciate that very much. Not everything is dark and gloomy. Now on to the dark and gloomy part. I'm going to talk about hiring practices. There are some very troubling hiring practices going on at the Sheriff Department. You know, of course, about the Mandoyan case, a train wreck of a hiring practice, which is now publicly analyzable. Anybody in the public who wants to can go see a report on my website with detailed information about what was put out publicly by the Civil Service Commission as well as the department ultimately, and can see even though the sheriff said this was a no-brainer in his direction, that it was one of the worst decisions ever made by the sheriff's department, and one that is so obviously facially wrong that it calls into question the credibility of the department as a whole. However, they are also doing some equally horrible things that will have a much greater impact. The hiring process that's going on right now, and this is a problem the Sheriff's Department has always had when it's had pressure to hire to fill gaps, or when it has taken over another agency, is under enormous pressure to ease hiring, to bring in people without as much of an analysis, or to allow in people they otherwise wouldn't. And currently the Sheriff's Department has scaled back drastically the length and nature of its background checks and the process it goes through to pick people, including dialing down on the polygraph questions that they ask. People were getting caught up by false polygraph indicators that would then get investigated or that wouldn't pass them. And so those questions have been removed. And now the description of the department is that the polygraph is done to the requirements. In other words, they don't ask any dangerous, embarrassing questions that might trip people up and possibly tell you that somebody is not honest or has a background for something that you wouldn't want, that you would then investigate. They have also greatly increased the passage rates at the academy. That may be as a result of something they've done that suddenly has caused us to have incredible people passing through the academy and doing much better than in years past, but cynical people might say no. We've heard repeated reports of rehiring of deputies with substantial evidence of misconduct in their record, not done with a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, which the sheriff has told you he will not start back up without consulting with you, but certainly done without your consultation and completely done in secret. This is despite all the time that the sheriff has said that he is interested in being transparent, collaborating with the COC and the board, and rebuilding community trust. The LSD has refused to allow us to examine the records of the hiring process, despite our repeated requests. State law provides for us and the board to be able to review records of county departments. The county code provides for it, and rulings of the court regarding transparency, including the recent California Supreme Court ALADS versus County of Los Angeles, require this. County council has advised the sheriff department that they of course can give us the hiring records so that we can look at them closely, that in fact there is no restriction. And yet, despite that, on August 8th, I received an email from a department member who I will not mention, who assured me they would consult with county council on that legal issue and get back to me. Radio silence since then. The sheriff has told us his philosophy on this subject. When he lost the preliminary injunction in the Mandoyan case, he said to the public, "They took away my lawyer. They took county counsel from me, and now the county is spending $1,100 an hour on lawyers." That is not the county rate. There has been a ruling in the Mandoyan case that the lawyers all have to be paid the county rate. It is not $1,100. And nobody took county counsel away from the sheriff. County counsel has been giving him advice nonstop, which he has chosen to ignore, and instead hired some lawyers who he likes what they tell him, and he's paying them, per the bills, $1,100 an hour. No checks have been cut that I know of, but that has nothing to do with the county setting that rate or county council refusing to advise the sheriff. Now, we have previously reported on the deactivation of internal affairs cases. We've also reported upon the cutting in half of IA cases opened. The fact of the matter is that LASD continues to maintain a set of secret IA-only files, and that secrecy is not just from us, but it's actually extended to their own staff, so that recently, within the last couple of weeks, they had a case review process where a decision was made by the assigned people as to whether or not to fire somebody over a very serious case. That person had a prior allegation of related conduct, and nobody but my staff in the room knew about that. Nobody else. The decision maker, the chief, didn't know. The assistant sheriffs apparently didn't know. And when my staff brought it to everybody's attention, not a single question was asked about it. And that's the result of that internal secrecy, as well as the secret effect on us. But we know what the effect of closing IA cases and failing to open IA cases is, because we have a media report, not from monitoring, because we haven't been given this information, but from a media reports that the hoax in Lancaster, the deputy who said that there was a sniper when there wasn't, that guy was caught lying before that. Was an IA case opened up? Was he put on a Brady list and fired as the government code 3303.5 permits? No. He was told, you know what, you're going to have to go back to custody. But in the meantime, stick around the station. And that's when we got the hoax. So we know, even though we are not given access to these secret files, we know the impact of this failure to open IA cases based on dishonesty and the failure to actually discipline people based on dishonesty. I have a section on secret societies. I'm going to skip it because we talked about it. And now I'm going to get to the elephant in the room that was mentioned earlier in public comment, myself being a criminal. It's improper for the LASD to investigate the OIG. OIG accesses a large amount of private information, confidential information that is protected by the official information privilege. And the primary people it's protected from, Sheriff's Department. Because the members of the Sheriff's Department who share information with us lawfully, their careers would be over if the sheriff knew what they had told us. People who are in custody, who are currently facing dire situations and talk to us about them. And when we first began our operation, we'd go in and talk to people, and people from Operation Safe Jails would pull them as soon as we'd finished talking to them and question them about what they told us. We finished that a while. That was behind us, but we're back into those days where you investigate the investigators. Who watches the watchmen? Well, apparently it's the people they're watching who watches the watchmen. And if they access that private information, the damage is done. There is nothing that can undo it. So, should the OIG be investigated if we're a bunch of criminals? Absolutely. By any agency that has jurisdiction and no conflict. Anyone. The sheriff sent a letter to the board saying that the FBI was welcomed and they're happy to do it. Well, then the FBI ought to be doing the investigation. The Attorney General, the District Attorney, who actually has a unit that does that. So if what the sheriff has said publicly, that all these administrators from the prior administration committed perjury, he's never produced any evidence, he ought to give that to the DA to look into. Not open up a group that investigates it directly under him outside the chain of command. That's exactly what happened under Tanaka, and which led to a bunch of sheriffs being in federal custody as a result. And today, we keep getting reports that the sheriff has fired up a group that targets the people on his enemy list. And by the way, I don't think I was on his enemy list in the past. In April, you all directed me to investigate secret societies. On that exact same day, the sheriff prepared a document, a delegation to Assistant Sheriff Murakami, that Assistant Sheriff Murakami described as a recusal. It was a delegation of authority, and it listed potential targets. Max Huntsman wasn't on them by name or even by category. And it included not just former officials of LASD, but current elected officials. In other words, the sheriff was saying his investigation into data breach, in other words, the implementation of my ordinance in the government code, which he calls data breach, was looking at elected officials, i.e. the board. Certainly not himself. But Max Huntsman wasn't on there. It included people who were appointed by an elected official. I wasn't. I was hired by 5 members of the board years ago, a different board than we have now. And yet, at some point, my name got added on. Now, the first enemies list under Richard Nixon, some people, I will paraphrase them when they found that they were on it, they said that they were honored to be on it. I'm honored too. And I'm happy to stand between you and the sheriff. I'm happy to do the investigation of secret societies. And I welcome him to take his best shot at investigating us. But doing it is improper. And serving a warrant on the OIG's office, if he were ever to consider doing that, to look at privileged information, that is totally improper. But much more concerning is the idea that he's targeting his political enemies. I'm just roadkill along the way. The bottom line is the people that he's talked about are the people within LASD, current and former managers who he has stated repeatedly he believes have committed perjury and offered no evidence, and he's hired rehired people with questionable backgrounds in terms of evidence of misconduct, retasked homicide detectives, and put together a whole team to work that stuff that is essentially a political investigation, or appears to be. May be wrong, it may all be untrue, it may all be very above board, and the evidence may be very compelling, but we have never been allowed to monitor it, nor has anybody else. It has not been sent to some independent investigative body, such as the DA's office, who doesn't have a dog in the fight. It's being held close to home, it appears. And because of the lack of transparency of this sheriff, despite of his claims of transparency, I have no way to disprove that what I'm telling you isn't exactly what's happening. Maybe it isn't. No way to know. So I suggest to you that you and the public should be terrified of what this sheriff has turned the Los Angeles Sheriff's Department into and what he might get up to because of his lack of transparency.
Thank you. Thank you for not being afraid.
And that's all I have to add unless there are any questions.
Yes.
Mr. Huntsman, I want to just say personally, obviously not speaking on behalf of the whole commission, but personally, thank you for your work, for standing up to all this conduct, for speaking truth to power on this, and you have my full support, and I suspect the support of everyone here in terms of continuing your work and whatever we can do to further that. One question does come to mind. I mean, because issues are local and it's difficult to have independent investigations of the Sheriff's Department and what you've described by local agencies, has there been any thought to getting the Attorney General, California Attorney General, involved with this? Has this information been shared with Attorney General Becerra and others in his staff?
I don't think it would be appropriate to comment on that directly. But I will say I've had lots of conversations with County Council, and they're very much aware of this issue and concerned about it, as one would expect from public officials who are charged with seeing that the laws are followed in Los Angeles County.
Right. Inspector Huntsman, I just want to say, too, that our experiences since we were convened, working with you and working with your office, that your integrity is impeachable and that you substantiate everything. And when you're not sure, just like you did right now, like you said, this is what it looks like. I'd love to see if it doesn't look like this, but I'm not looking at anything to decide. So it's really, it's so unfortunate that it's gotten to this place, of such, almost like there's a war going on and warlike behaviors. But we just have to stay the course, and we have to do our oversight. You have to do your inspector job. Sheriff has to do its job. The Sheriff's Department has to do its job. Hopefully there can be, I know that there's been, I'm going to say this is only half a joke. Maybe there needs to be a meeting for reconciliation among all the parties who are going at it, So that might be a valuable thing, if that's possible. But thank you for your perseverance and also your clarity, always.
Thank you.
And I'd like to add that it is essential that you and your office continue to do the high-quality work that you've been doing to provide guidance and assistance, investigative ability for the commission, and that the what certainly appears to be an outrageous nature of the allegations or the investigation against you and others does not deter you from continuing to do your job.
Yeah, and we did send a letter to the sheriff expressing our support for your independence in all of these matters. And we don't know where any of this is going to go moving forward, but obviously, the COC wants you to stay the course. The Board of Supervisors wants you to stay the course.
In criminal law, there's an old expression called a Rucker motion. And when a defendant didn't like their lawyer and tried to get rid of them and said there was a conflict, in the case of Mr. Rucker, Ed Rucker, the defendant punched the lawyer and said, well, there's a conflict now. And that's essentially what's happened here. I think the sheriff is attempting to prevent us from doing our job by saying, I'm criminally investigating the IG, therefore there's a conflict. Well, I'm afraid it doesn't work like that. We will do our job. We've done our job all along. And if there's any conflict, it's in what agency is doing the investigating. But we'll keep doing our job. And as I said, I'm happy to tell happy stories when we have them. But when the stories are unhappy, then we're going to tell them.
Okay, now we're going to move to the.
We have one.
Sorry?
We have one comment.
Are we commenting on each of these items?
Oh, sorry.
Or are we doing public comment at the end?
At the end, sorry. Just wanted
Can you just wait for public comment once we go through this agenda item? Yeah, hold on a few more minutes. So we're going to turn to the Sheriff's Department, and we have Assistant Sheriff Steve Gross again. Any reporting?
Yes, ma'am. So I didn't know exactly what you would want to update on, so I'm prepared to discuss some of the items that you may have questions on if we like to do it that way.
Yeah, why don't you do that? Okay, we actually have a couple of questions.
Sure. At a previous meeting and by correspondence to the Sheriff's Department, we'd asked the Undersheriff Murakami to come to us to give us a quick update on a number of investigations you all were conducting. The first was one involving Ed Buck and the West Hollywood situation, and we're wondering if there's an update on that investigation that you could share with us.
Well, as you mentioned, it's an open investigation and it's an active investigation. So our investigators are working very closely with the DA's office to provide all the facts and evidence that we can so the DA's office can review this information and make their determination. And at this point, there's really nothing more we can say other than we're fully cooperating with them on that. It's a priority investigation for us, and our investigators are working closely with them.
Right. And has there been any update in the investigation of the Twyman or Vargas shootings?
So as far as that shooting, it would be inappropriate for me to comment fully on, but what I will tell you is this. That shooting was already now reviewed. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a whole process when shootings occur. And that process went forward in front of our critical incident review, where it's a preliminary process where we take a look at tactics, risk management, and training issues. And some administrative actions were taken at that point. While that occurs, the Homicide Bureau will continue their investigation, looking at all of the angles of the shooting with the oversight of the Office of Inspector General. Once they finish their investigation, all that evidence will be turned over to the DA's office so they can make a determination on the case. And then once that process goes and we find out whether they will seek any criminal charges or not, then we will go into an administrative investigative mode, which our internal affairs will do, and then ultimately that will come back around for the executive force review process, where we will look and determine if there's any department violation as far as policy and procedures, and then that will be overseen by the executives in charge of that.
So there's nothing factually at this point that you can update us on?
Nothing other than what we've given you.
All right. And the final question we posed, we had received some information that there was a Truth and Reconciliation office that had been opened in the department. Can you give us an update on what's happening with that particular commission, whether there's an office that has been opened and where you are in that process with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission?
So as the sheriff has stated before, there is no Truth and Reconciliation Committee as it was come to be known 9 months ago. That was more of an idea, and the defining exactly what that is at this point would be really something I couldn't tell you. I will say that the sheriff is committed to due process for all the employees. Now, as far as the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, as the board addressed the issue, the board had placed some measures in place on a motion to where we won't be able to rehire personnel. So all that is essentially stopped. as far as your concerns in far as that goes. Now, we do have multiple levels of review that occur naturally on the department, and that can start from everything from the inquiry process through the administrative investigative process or even criminal investigations. And this goes through the decision makers and case disposition and even the case review process. And as we move forward, the employees have due rights to the grievance processes, civil service process, and appeals. I say all of that because for the sheriff, investigative sufficiency must be achieved to ensure all facts and evidence are considered by our decision makers. So this is an ongoing thing where there are reviews going on within the process, and it's through these normal processes. Department leaders, when they find out information, have a duty in administrative matters to make sure that there's quality assurance. So that's another thing that's always occurring and has occurred on our department. And whenever it's believed that their employees' due process is not occurred, the sheriff's intention is to have that case reviewed wherever it is within that process and make sure that that information is placed into the investigation, if you will, to make sure that decision makers know that this evidence is there. And then that will be added in. So as far as truth and reconciliation, no, we don't have that process going.
All right. Thank you.
What has the sheriff done with the list that former Sheriff McDonald put together, the 300 list of Brady names that has been the subject of lawsuits and a recent Supreme Court decision? So what is the status of that list?
Do you want to answer that one, Matt? So the list, there was a court ruling on the Brady list issue. I wasn't totally prepared to talk about it, but what the court ruling simply stated is that we don't have to keep a list. It would be our preference to have the DA's office keep the Brady list and to make the determination of who's on the Brady list. So that list is actually part of another court case, and I don't know if I have the total update on, is there any determination been made by that judge? And no determination has been made, so I'm just refreshing my memory on where.
So just to expand on that, does the list still exist in some form, or has it been destroyed?
You want to answer it?
I've got a copy if they want it back.
Yeah, well, the reason why I'm pausing is because I actually don't.
I'm sorry?
The reason why I'm pausing is I don't know the answer to that. So I would have to report back to you on that. It'd probably be the best way to do it so I don't have to guess.
Okay, well, I would certainly hope that whatever the sheriff decides in the future, that list be maintained by the sheriff's department and not destroyed. That may be of some assistance for the district attorney, but in any case, it is not good policy and practice to destroy a list like that.
I'll take that, ma'am. Back to the sheriff.
Thank you.
Oh. Real quick, maybe I misunderstood, but the fact that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission no longer exists as such doesn't mean that, well, let me state it in the affirmative. Isn't it true that the department is still going through previously closed files and doing a re-examination of those?
I would have to ask you, what do you specifically mean by going through can you elaborate on what you're asking?
Well, my understanding was that one of the functions of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission was to take cases that had gone through the Civil Service Commission that were deemed closed and doing a re-examination of those. And there's been much reporting on that. And so now that you say that the Truth and Reconciliation Commission is effectively disbanded as such, my question is the department in one way or the other still doing re-examinations of previously closed cases?
As I explained to you through the different levels of process, we're looking at those cases when information comes to us that we need to update those cases with information. I have no knowledge of us looking at closed cases that have already gone all the way through the process. That's all on hold to my understanding.
So it would only be looked at when someone brings further information? Is that what you're saying?
And the cases within those processes that I said all the way through the civil service process, yes.
Okay.
It's normal business that the department does these things. This is an employee could bring information through the grievance process. There could be things discovered through the different layers of investigation and review. And whenever we do that, we even if we're going to do any settlements, we always bring that information into the case so that the decision makers have the most current and relevant information to make their decisions.
Okay. Maybe I should ask Mr. Huntsman then, because my understanding of it is, thank you, sir, is too limited to be able to analyze that. I guess what I'm trying to determine is the reporting that we've all heard in terms of a re-examination. Maybe I'm not asking the question exactly right, but I think you understand it. Is that still going on to your knowledge?
In the way you describe it, I have no knowledge that it is going on, and if the sheriff tried to do it, I think he would be in violation of what the principle, at least, behind the court's ruling in the Mandoyan case. Because post-civil service, the county charter provides the county council controls litigation, and that's what led to the Mandoyan litigation, because the sheriff allegedly had one of his folks do a settlement that had no lawyer signature on it and just sort of stepped into county council's role. And that happens post-civil service. Pre-civil service, there are a lot of shenanigans that go on. And it is correct that they went on under previous administrations and they go on now. When we have an IA report we've been working on for some time, and during the course of that, we found instances where the department would, through the case review process, a theoretically evidence-based process. Well, I gave you an example recently when evidence was withheld from the decision makers, but in theoretically evidence-based, where they'd conclude somebody should be fired, but then somebody in a back room entered into a settlement, quote unquote, prior to civil service, in which they modified the record of whether or not they were even founded as to the discipline and undid all that. That's a totally inappropriate process without proper checks and balances, which begs for oversight. And that happened under the previous administration. And I think it's still going on today in different forms, as well as some of these rehires are people with evidence regarding them that would not support rehiring them, in my opinion. But so there are areas to be concerned about, but they're not the classic truth and reconciliation concept of going back to what the sheriff said he would do of 400 deputies who were all wrongfully fired, and he was going to go through one by one and rehire them post-civil service. To my knowledge, that process is not happening, and I would be shocked, although I have been shocked more than once in the past 9 months, if the sheriff actually tried to do that given the legal situation he's in currently. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be worried about rehiring.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to go to the ad hoc committee updates, and I really want to be able to go to public comment. So are there any other committee, because I do have something to say about the family assistance program real quick. Any other ad hocs need to report in? Okay. Oh, so I just want to just briefly let you know that the implementation of the family assistance program, which is the program that we recommended and the supervisors adopted regarding getting help, counseling, some burial costs met for the families of loved ones who lose their life through an interaction with a sheriff's deputy, or if they die while incarcerated under the jurisdiction of the sheriff's department. So that is ongoing. I'm very pleased to say that as they're building this new program, they're actually implementing the program. And it's an extraordinary collaboration. It's made up of the Department of Mental Health, the medical examiner, which is a coroner, LASD, the COC, the OIG, the CEO, County Council, and the Department of Public Health. And they've had these groups have met 3 or 4 times, and they're considered the implementation team. And the Department of Mental Health with Deputy Director Miriam Brown is the lead, and that's where the family assistance program will be housed. It's already decided to staff, and they found the money to staff 1 clinician and 1 psychiatric social worker, as well as funds for overtime work for the work of 4 clinicians, because obviously they may have to roll out any time of the day or night. They've just one quick story in terms of the how they've responded. There was a imminent death of a inmate about to happen at LACUSC. Both parents of the inmate arrived from Oregon. The FAP was able to provide trauma-informed counseling to the parents as they had to make the tough decision to take their loved one off life support. Then the mother informed the FAP that she did not have the financial resources to stay multiple days to see this through or to get back home. She didn't have the finances to get back home to Oregon. So they worked diligently with social workers and staff from LACUSC to find the necessary funds to address the mother's needs. So that's just an example of the creativity and the commitment that we're going to be seeing from this new program. The coroner, there are some, one of the challenges, of course, is notification. Who gets to be notified when someone's deceased? So the coroner will be coming in October to present to the commission, and then in October and in November, the Family Assistance Program Implementation Team will come and present and give us an update on where they are. So this is moving along, and I just really wanted everyone to know that. So let's move to public comment. I'm reminding everyone that you have 2 minutes, and you can address anything that has come up today or anything that is under the purview of the commission.
So we have one public comment for item 3, and that's Dominique Brown, and we have 9 public comment cards for public comment item 4. So Dominique Brown.
Good afternoon. How are you guys doing today? I'm here on behalf of Ryan Twyman. I'm his older sister. I'm the one who came a couple of months ago and made our demands. And none of our demands have been met. The only demand that has been met, but has been met to disgrade my brother's name, was the release of the coroner's report. We did not get the coroner's report. They put it on the news. I never heard of somebody getting killed, of their coroner's report getting put on the news. And then it wasn't even a full coroner's report. They put in his background history of when he was being arrested from a teenager to an adult. And then put in how many times he was shot. We got our own investigator to do a coroner's report as well. So it's like, it's a hit and miss right now. The sheriffs aren't doing anything to help us find out who are the 2 police officers that shot. Who are the 1 police officer who went back to his car to retrieve the bigger gun to shoot even more. We don't have those names. It's going on 4 months on the 6th, and we still don't have those names. We don't want those names to retaliate. We want to know those names so we won't be scared of other police officers. Because at this point, we don't respect no sheriffs. We don't know who's approaching us. So we have to know those names so we can know who's approaching us, because some of our family members are still being harassed by the sheriff's department. To this day, the individual who was in the car with my brother, who's still alive, has got put over. He got put over 7 times in 1 day last week by the sheriffs. Never got a ticket or anything. No type of citation, no nothing. Oh no, your light is messed up, no anything. Just harassing him. So we don't know if this is the same police officers that's harassing him that was the ones that were shooting at the car. We need to know these individuals' names to understand why is this still happening to our family members.
Thank you. Is that Ingrid? Okay.
Our next speaker, Henry Scott, followed by Patrick Braden, followed by Regi Bunch.
Thank you. I'm going to read an abbreviated copy of a letter I sent to Sheriff Villanueva on July 11.
I'm a journalist covering the city of West Hollywood, which contracts with the LA County Sheriff's Department for Public Safety Services. My job as a journalist is to let the residents of West Hollywood know what is really going on, which is quite a challenge. One thing our residents need to know is how your department has responded to 2 incidents of possible misconduct by local law enforcement officers, one of which has cost Los Angeles County $7.5 million in payouts to settle a civil suit, and which undoubtedly has contributed to the increase in liability payments that West Hollywood and other contract cities are making. On January 27, I submitted a request via UPS to your office for information regarding the investigation and possible discipline of deputies involved in the shooting death by a deputy of one young man and the wounding of another at 939 Palm Avenue. That's the one the $7.5 million was paid for. The request also asked for information regarding the deputy involved in the 2015 death of a young man, pedestrian, killed on the sidewalk in Santa Monica Boulevard when he was hit by a squad car that ran out of control. That request, according to UPS, was received and signed for on January 29. I'm losing my time. I'm going to jump ahead. Basically, over this time, I've gotten next to no responses except for letters saying we have the ability to postpone any response for 14 days. I've gotten those over and over. And when I've called, just so you know, I called the Sheriff's Department Risk Management Bureau for clarification about the delays. My call is always forwarded to a deputy. I end up getting a voicemail message that warns that the message you leave, quote, won't be monitored, unquote, which I take to mean we aren't going to listen to it. That's a powerful sign that the people who work for you are not interested in communicating with the people you're supposed to protect and support. So 8 months later, I have nothing. The complaint is we've got a lot of requests. We've got 18,000 employees. I suggest you reassign a few and get this done.
Patrick Braden, followed by Reggie Bunch, followed by John Willis.
Hello, and I want to say thank you to the board for allowing this public hearing. I want to tell you a little bit about my brother, but I'm here because I am directly opposed to the sanctuary policy that seems to be statewide and certainly citywide. I live in East LA for the last 40 years. I documented 63 burglaries within a 1-block radius of my business. 1 block, 63 burglaries. But I want to tell you a little bit about my brother, John. John died in 1974. He was a Cub Scout troop leader. That means he was the first guy to step off the sidewalk and get hit by a speeding pickup truck driven by a guy who said, when he was found a couple of days later, he said that his name was Manuel Vasquez. That turned out not to be his name. His name turned out to be, we found out about 100 days later, after 100 days in jail, his real name was found out. And thinking about the sanctuary policies, I don't think that all of these people who are here seeking asylum, seeking sanctuary, are being served well by the idea that they can break the laws, break the rules, and get away with it. And, it's unfortunate that that's Javier Becerra's position currently, and I just don't think, I'm grateful to all the sheriff's deputies here today, and I'm grateful to this commission, so that I can tell you that I think there's a lot of Americans who are basically law-abiding good citizens who want to abide by the laws. We're not building any pride or any good
thank you, sir. Your time is up.
Goodwill in these people.
Thank you.
Reggie Bunch, followed by John Willis, followed by Raul Rodriguez.
I think the arrogance of the Sheriff's Department is finally being looked at. in a more personal stake with the county because they're coming after y'all. Imagine if you weren't a county official and you're a family member and they come by your home and arrest you 7 times and put their flashlights in your home, threaten you with all types of verbal harassment, feeling or fearing no type of retribution from no type of higher authority. And now they feel even more emboldened to come after county officials. And I hope that the sincerity of what organizers and family members have been saying is starting to sit in a little bit more deeper within you all. Because you all need subpoena power. We fought and gave example after example of why you need it. But of how they're about to go after Max Huntsman and what they've been doing to the Ryan Twyman family, I think it's overwhelming evidence to prove that you all need subpoena power. There's nothing else that I can really say around how to hold the sheriff's department accountable. The sheriff just gave you, he didn't say anything substantive into Hernan Vera's questions. And Max Huntsman, well, my 2 minutes are up, but subpoena power now. Subpoena power.
Thank you.
John Willis, followed by Raul Rodriguez Jr., followed by Lori Masonis.
Yes, I'd like to speak about your code of conduct here. While on the face of it, none of it seems really unreasonable. It's just the unfair way that you dispense with it. One thing it says is I don't have the right to engage in dialogue. Well, I do. I'm actually having dialogue with you right now. You might want to, conversation between 2 or more is dialogue. You might want to rephrase that. Who does have the authority to eject someone from this meeting? You do, Ms. Giggans. You only, as a chairperson. Your friend who's not here today, Mr. Thompson, who tried to eject me, which, by the way, it failed because if you notice, the sheriffs escorted me back in. Herr Vera over here, he tried to eject me, and it didn't work, did it? Because you don't have the authority, sir. She does, only. Now, when Mr. Thompson did try to eject me, 2 people stopped him, tried to stop him. Mr. Williams and this young lady right here. You did nothing. You didn't ring your gong. You didn't ask him to stop. He committed a Brown Act violation by interrupting me and by coming down here and engaging with me. Yet you did nothing. Now you say we're not supposed to clap. Well, last time you actually had the sheriffs remove me for clapping, right? I heard people clap today. Again, you did not reach for your gong. You did nothing. You are abusive and bigoted in the way that you dispense your authority at that desk right there. You need to wake up. You need to get a copy of the Brown Act. You need to read it. You need to read it to your friends here. I support you guys 100%. I've noticed today there are a couple issues. The secret societies, you might want to get on that. But I don't think they deserve to be unfairly documented. I mean, but you should talk to them about it. It seems a little untoward. It seems like some of the names of these gangs doesn't sound good. So please get on that. But God bless you guys and thank you for protecting us.
Raul Rodriguez, Lori Masonis, Robin Vidston.
I'd like to start by showing my shirt of Robert Rosas, Border Patrol agent who was murdered by illegals 50 feet from the border in San Diego. This is the problem we're having in America. Too many people are crossing the border illegally. And we need to put a stop to that. They need to come into this country legally, the right way, get in line, become legal. The second issue I'd like to talk about is, I didn't get here in time to hear Patti Giggans make the comment about signs. Now, my question is, did you vote on this? And if you did, is it in writing? Because quite frankly, you're in violation of my and everybody else's here who's in this meeting, a violation of my First Amendment right. A 20 by 30 sign, whether it's an 8 by 11 or a 20 by 30, I have the right to express my opinion, whether it's verbal or in writing. You're taking that right away from me. Thirdly, I presented a letter to one of your clerks, and she's going to give you that letter, or I don't know whether you got it yet, but I have filed a complaint against you and anybody in this commission who has violated my rights or the rights of anybody in this room. I wrote the letter to the district attorney, Jackie Lacey, and I also wrote a complaint with the federal government because this agency is acting unconstitutionally against my rights and the rights of other people who have the right to express their opinion. I tried walking through that through there with my signs. They told me I couldn't. You violated my rights, and you will pay.
Thank you.
Lori Masanis, followed by Robin Vidston, followed by Andres Kwong.
By the way, recall, sheriff, and Yusuf.
Hi, my name's Lori Masonis. I'm basically here to say I'm requesting, I am pleading, I plead that Sheriff Villanueva to please cooperate with ICE. This must be done to protect public safety. As you can see, I am wearing a t-shirt with the picture of Officer Singh. Officer Singh was murdered by an illegal alien late last year. The illegal alien who murdered him had a criminal record. Just think, if this illegal alien had been deported, Officer Singh would still be here. He left behind a beautiful wife and a 5-month-old child. And just think, this child is permanently separated from his father. Thank you for your time. Help support ICE.
Robin Vidston, followed by Andres Kwan, followed by Ernest Moore.
Yes, my name is Robin Vidston. I'm with the Remembrance Project. We honor American citizens killed by those illegally in our country. We are here as advocates pleading with the sheriff to work with ICE within the criminal court system. I'm wearing the shirt today of DeAndre Mitchell. He was killed by a man in our country illegally from Honduras who had been in the custody of the Sheriff's Department multiple times. One time he kicked a woman in the head 10 times. He was in custody 5 days before he committed intentional fire that killed 5 Americans. This death was preventable if our laws would have been enforced. If when he was in custody, he would have been deported. DeAndre Mitchell has a 2-year-old child at the time when he was killed, who is now being raised by his mother. And she asked, who is looking out after his baby? I also have a shirt with Deputy Michael Davis pictured. He and another deputy in Sacramento were killed by an illegal alien. He had 4 children, the other deputy had 2. We are talking about American children being raised without their parents simply because our laws are not enforced. All of these deaths are preventable if our law enforcement would work with ICE. Every individual we're mentioning today had a criminal record, should have been turned over to ICE and deported, and all of these Americans and their children would still have their loved ones with them. Please, please consider working with the sheriff to cooperate with ICE on every criminal alien in custody. Thank you.
Andres Cuam, followed by Ernest Moore, followed by Nick S.
Andres Cuam, ACLU. It is the fact that the LA Sheriff's Deputy Lobby has sought to block the constitutional mandate under Brady. When former Sheriff McDonald tried to follow the law and hand over to the DA a Brady list of 300 problem deputies, ALAS sued, claiming that Brady did not apply to the Sheriff's Department. ALAS is dead wrong. Held the California Supreme Court a few weeks ago. The association, quote, the association's contrary view that Brady relates only to the prosecutor and that it does not impose obligations on law enforcement is distressing and wrong, end quote. ALAS and now the sheriff have taken ludicrous yet dangerous position. Following the court decision, Villanueva tweeted he would comply by not maintaining a Brady list. It is this kind of lax, enabling attitude to misconduct and dishonesty that has allowed for 2/3 of deputies on the Brady list to remain on the force today. Last reported in the Times, Deputy Taco Sauce was still in the force. And worse, a recent case in point, the Lancaster sniper hoax. You really can't make this stuff up. But this deputy certainly did. And this is an example of a department in disarray. And Villanueva acted tough when he had no other options because of the heightened scrutiny. The reality is that this deputy had a history of dishonesty, but there was never a full investigation. He was kept on the force, and look what happened. Villanueva has slowed down investigations into serious misconduct, only initiating new investigations at half the rate of the 3 previous administrations going back a decade. He's sending the message loud and clear that impunity reigns. When we submitted a PRA request for SB 1421 information relating to deputies in the Brady list, the Sheriff's Department responded saying they don't know what we're asking for, that there's no such list. We urge the COC to recommend to the board to establish a working group to create a Brady-compliant process in our county that includes the PD, the APD, and the OIG, and that the Sheriff's Department be required to maintain a Brady list.
Ernest Moore, followed by Nick S., followed by Debbie L. Johnson.
My name is Ernest Moore. I am actually a former social worker with DCFS and Child Protective Services. I know firsthand that the Civil Service Commission is totally corrupt. And I know that from the last administration, and it's probably still the same now. I'm here to actually demand that they restructure this commission. This is not citizens are not given enough time to present their case issues, especially me, because I have a long history of criminal violations against me by the Sheriff's Department. And maybe we could, maybe I could present my evidence in videotape or something, and you could air it at another time. But this is totally ridiculous. You got to get them out of the courts. 111 North Hill is just totally corrupt because the sheriff's totally corrupt. Now the sheriff's totally corrupt because the LADA is totally corrupt, and I know that from personal experience with Jackie Lacey. Because I reported her about 3 or 4 years ago about my probate case. She assigned it to a deputy district attorney, and she gave it to a Hispanic DA, called me and said, well, I don't see nothing wrong with it. So I complained and said, how come this Hispanic DA is not violating my rights and not giving me equal protection under the law? They gave it to a black DA, and she said, if you say anything about Mexicans, I'm not going to do anything about it. And nothing's been done about it since then. Now I filed complaints with your Inspector General about what's going on in the probate court. Nothing's been done about it yet. The sheriff deputy's just sitting there watching this, all these crimes being committed in my case right in front of him, will not accept my citizen's arrest, won't even take a police report. All Jackie Lacey does is bend over, grab her ankles, and kiss boots with Mexicans. just like Mark Riley Thomas.
Thank you.
They're the enemies of Black Americans.
Nick S., followed by Daviel Johnson.
I just want to say I voted for the new sheriff, Nueva. I actually seen him at a Bengals and Chargers game. I stood up and I applauded him because I really thought he was going to come and make a difference. And just from his comments on the Fort Apache and all rehiring ex-troublemakers in the force, I really believe that he's actually taken about 15 steps backwards. And I see that, you know, he's starting to go in the direction of all the other sheriffs. Is there an actual update on Fort Apache by any chance, if they're going to tear it down and get rid of it? And then I'm going to say, you know, there's the guy that was up here talking about what benefit would sheriffs have joining a gang. What benefit does anybody have from joining a gang? What benefit does anybody have from doing heroin or becoming a drug addict? You know, most people get in gangs because they live in gang area and they get pressured into doing that. Or maybe their mom and dad weren't in the picture, you know, their friends at school. Around 7th, 8th grade is when people really determine what they're going to do in their life. And they're in a rough area, they're going to become a gang member. I think some of these sheriffs come in to the force like, yeah, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Then they get, you know, coerced by the other sheriffs and becoming into the gang. You know, Jump Out Boys, the Vikings, the Regulators. And Max, man, thank you for all your hard work, man. And I don't know, this guy Brian and Max, be careful, because I know you guys always speak up on stuff that we're thinking about. Just be careful, man. If you need any help, I got your back.
Daviel Johnson.
Hi, my name is Daviel Johnson. I'm the girlfriend of Ryan Twyman. I was killed on June 6th by the Los Angeles Sheriff Department just 3 days after his birthday. He is a father of 3 sons who are all under 3. One is 1, one is 2, one is 3. We have been harassed by the Sheriff Department like no other ever since it's happened. The Sheriff's Department know us by our names. They know us by our cars. That's the Los Angeles Sheriff and the Compton Sheriff's Department. The Jump Out Boys that he was just talking about, they will pull up, their car won't even be in park. They'll open all the doors and automatically come to the car. They don't ask us to open the door. When they approach us, they automatically open our doors just like they did in the incident with Ryan Twyman. And they harass everyone in the neighborhood. They will pull over me. They will pull over the boy who was in the car with him. They don't have no mercy. They'll laugh. They'll drive by the neighborhood. They'll flick us off. They'll ask us, hey, can we get one of those pins? The Compton Sheriff's Department, certain ones sometimes will say, oh, we didn't have anything to do with that, and try to make peace with us because whatever happened with A.J. Brown when she was supporting what happened. I really don't like how the Sheriff's Department, y'all see all this stuff that's going on and y'all know it's wrong, but y'all don't say nothing because it makes other sheriffs turn against y'all. And that's not cool because this man lost his life from sitting in a car. They won't say what happened. Every time we ask a question, they're investigating. But if Ryan Twyman would have opened fire on them officers, they would have sent him to jail, sentenced him, and he would have been on his time right now as we speak. And it took all this time for us to get any information, which is only a video and a coroner's report that they put on the news. Anything that you've seen on the news is the only thing they released to us. They won't say nothing. They won't give a statement. All they keep saying that they're investigating. And y'all supposed to be the people that's supposed to be there for us. And y'all destroyed our whole family. His mom cried all day long. I still have to go to work. They even took me to jail at the time. Do you know they're still making me go to court for them killing Ryan Twyman? They won't throw anything out. They won't say anything. They won't even have no remorse for nothing that they've done to our family. And they ruined our whole family. Like, everybody is distraught by this. And I don't feel like there's no sympathy, no remorse, or no nothing for what y'all did. And that's messed up because he was sitting in a car and he was not armed and he didn't do nothing wrong. So justice for Ryan Twyman, and I really hope that y'all and the Sheriff's Department can do something about that.
Thank you. Okay. Ingrid, could you just check up on the most current situation with that for us, please? Thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. We're going to adjourn the meeting. I want to appreciate everyone for a pretty peaceful meeting. I appreciate everyone for listening to each other. And we will meet you again next month, October 22nd.
Any chance you can pull some of the stuff I said off the transcript and